See, I got agua. I needed water to clear my throat. You got dry there and started scratchy. Nick Barris, along with Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney, taking your phone call 737-7587. And wanted to ask you this. You litigate, and if you have to, you'll go into court and you'll take them on.
Right.
But a lot of cases never get that far, right? Why is it, or do they often get to court?
No, they don't. And there's two things that have happened that have changed this dramatically over the last 20 years. The first thing is lawyers like myself, and we're a fairly small fraternity of malpractice lawyers, we only take the best cases because we only take cases we think we can win, because you can't afford to lose them. I mean, there are times when you lose.
Have you ever lost?
Oh, yeah.
You have lost?
You actually lose most of them because that's how hard they are to win. And once you've lost a few of them, then you begin to figure out which ones you can win and which ones are capable of settling. And so we're now taking cases that we feel extremely confident we can win or settle.
And now, have you taken one before? This is curious, just your thinking and how you pick. Have you been at one where the damages could be incredibly huge, but you're looking at a 50-50? Would you take it?
Yeah.
50-50, you have 50% chance, and you know going in, you're being real with yourself, saying, you know, there's a 50% chance.
If the damages are catastrophic, severe, which is sort of my litmus test, if they're really bad, you've got lost earnings in the millions, I will take it. Because, Nick, there's situations where you think it's 50-50, the jury will look at it and say, no, I think there was malpractice here. It's amazing. I'll take a case where I think it's 75-25 that I should win the case, and then lose the case, and jury says, no, we don't think there was negligence. So there's a lot of components to this, but at the end of the day, if you have substantial damages, juries pay more attention to these cases. There's a more even playing field, and you have a better chance of winning. That's my judgment, and I'm not alone in that judgment. But the other part why these cases don't go to trial as much is we have now what's called mediation. It's basically a settlement procedure where after all the work is done to determine what everybody's position is, everyone's testified by deposition, and we're waiting on the trial, the parties will come together, usually at a law office, and a mediator, which is just a lawyer, will sit down as a third party and try to get us and the defendants, a hospital, a doctor, to come to a reasonable settlement figure, some amount where both parties can walk away from this thinking they've accomplished something. And that has been a game changer because so many cases now get resolved in mediation.
Oh, and then some cases are resolved too when you have and you've had a few of these, where the hospital just says, can we please settle?
That's right. And and you want to get your client money as fast as you possibly can. I mean, you don't want to settle for pennies on the dollar or dimes on the dollar, but at the same time, these people need money and they need it quick. And so it's to their advantage to get what I call now money versus later money if you can get a reasonable settlement.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good advice. Let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
Just a question for the attorney there.
Sure.
I hear these people call in, and they've spoken with other attorneys, and they, for whatever reason, didn't give them any practical advice. Why would an attorney, any attorney, not say that, look, this is a malpractice case, you need to be speaking with a malpractice attorney? I don't understand why that they wouldn't pass on something that they don't handle or couldn't handle to a professional like Mr. Kelly, and not get this. All to take a word of mouth. Say, look, I don't handle this. You need to speak with a malpractice attorney. There's just a few of them around, and pick you one out. I think it's Clint has said in the past that maybe 5 in Tennessee. So I don't understand why they wouldn't give some advice to people like that.
Interesting question.
There are 5 prominent ones in the Nashville area, but we are a fairly small fraternity. Joe, that's a $64,000 question, but I tell you what I think is different today. When I started practicing, people called their friends, and their friends would recommend lawyers to them, and like you said, by word of mouth, or other attorneys say, we don't do this kind of work.
Yeah.
Now they click on Google, and all these lawyers advertise as if they take medical malpractice cases when they do not. Or they advertise as if they're qualified to handle these cases when they are not. And so these people call, and some of these lawyers want to listen and see, can I make a quick buck off this case?
Right. And the truth is, a lawyer that's not specializing in malpractice, with a few of your cases, for instance, the spray one, okay? that's so obvious. I probably could have litigated that. Okay,
Right.
not that your expertise didn't come into play, but they hope they get a few of those walking through the door.
Right. So they think, well, I'll just write a letter to the hospital or to the doctor's insurance company, and I'll get a quick buck out of it. And they'll
may
try
not be
to
as much as they could get.
No,
right?
well, not even near.
Not even near.
And then they don't know what they're doing, and so they'll sit on the case for a while. They'll write letters. Nothing happens because the hospital, the doctor's insurance company knows these lawyers aren't legit, or they won't pay anywhere near what the client takes. And so the case sits for months until finally the client gets frustrated, starts looking up other attorneys or talks to friends, and finally gets into the hands of a legitimate malpractice attorney, someone who's certified like myself. But Joe's right. A lot of these people could be saved some anguish and some pain if they simply got referred. I mean, most good doctors, in fact, the vast majority of good doctors, they will refer patients to other doctors who know how to handle
specialists.
Exactly.
That's what you are.
That's how the system is supposed to work, and law is lagged behind medicine in terms of getting patients referred to specialists. So,
I guess, unless it's obvious, someone walks into your office and says, "Can you help me with my estate planning?" I mean, you're going to say, that's not my legal field. That's not what I do, for setting up wills and such. I mean, you probably could do it if you had to, but you're going to refer them to someone else, wouldn't you?
Exactly, because the law now has become so specialized, you really need to send a case to a specialist. But what really grates at me are attorneys who think they can write a letter and get a settlement that's going to be sufficient for a patient when they do not know how to handle a malpractice case, certainly would never try a medical malpractice case, and just sit on it and let the patient suffer because they don't get the patient anywhere near the money they deserve or any money at all. And the patient calls me and says, what happened here? Mm-hmm. It's frustrating.
So, and just so we're clear, the difference in your training as a specialist with malpractice was that in your field of study, you emphasized malpractice law. I mean, you all as lawyers go through the general law school and get a basic understanding of the law. What separates you from someone that maybe handles DUIs?
There's American Professional Board of Liability Attorneys has strict criteria for certifying medical malpractice specialists. Probably what separates me from any other attorney who's not certified are the number of medical malpractice cases that I've had jury trials on.
Gotcha.
I mean, the vast majority of lawyers have never tried a medical malpractice case in front of a jury. I have many times. And so because of that, in addition to the fact that I take 80% of my cases are medical malpractice, and I have to keep up with the literature on it to stay certified, that's what separates me from other attorneys who don't do this work.
Makes perfect sense. Does this involve both state and federal court? You ever go to federal court for anything?
I do. I have a case pending against Vanderbilt right now in federal court.
Federal court. What's the difference? What will determine whether you go to fed court?
My client in the case right now in federal court against Vanderbilt is a citizen of Arkansas.
Okay.
And if you have citizens from different states, then you can have what's called diversity jurisdiction, which basically is the federal standard for getting into federal court and trying a case to a federal jury.
Do the laws then vary? Because you've told me before here in, for instance, the state of Tennessee, tort law, okay? Now we're not talking about chocolate torts or cherry torts. We're talking about tort law, which is the field that you practice. And if you would, the restrictions being made different in Tennessee than maybe other states that make it more difficult to sue. What is tort law?
Well, in this case, what you're talking about is healthcare liability law, which is a form of tort law.
Okay.
Tennessee has very specific requirements for, first of all, for giving notice to a doctor or hospital and then filing suit against a doctor or hospital. That's another reason why expertise comes into place, because Tennessee passed tort reform 6 years ago, and because of that now, you have to go through very specific requirements and certifying to the doctor that you have an expert, making sure the doctor has proper pre-suit notice, and if you make any mistakes along those lines, your case can be dismissed and you can be shut out of court for good. And so because of that, I think more and more cases are being funneled to attorneys like myself, because notwithstanding what Joe said, there are some lawyers say, I don't want to touch these things because
it's just so complex.
Correct.
This is it's becoming more difficult to sue.
It is. Very much so. And that was the design. There are statistics out there that show medical malpractice filings went down more than 60%.
Okay, big picture, and I know where you're coming from on this, but that is dictated by laws passed by our legislature, who are elected by the people.
That's correct.
So are they protecting the people here or the hospitals and the doctors? They all deserve certain protections and fairness, but what's going on here in your mind?
They're protecting the doctors and the hospitals, the healthcare providers, no question
But doesn't that also keep medical costs lower, Clint? Because if there are fewer lawsuits being filed, then they're paying out fewer of these settlements, and my medical bill won't be as expensive to compensate for those settlements.
There's been no proof that a reduction in medical malpractice cases reduces healthcare premiums by 1 penny. It's just not, Nick. I mean, what this has done, it's allowed medical malpractice insurance carriers and hospitals to pocket more money. And that just doesn't get filtered to the patients. Has not. There's been no proof for that at all. This was basically a payoff to the hospitals and doctors when the Republicans got elected and took majority in 2010.
Malpractice insurance expensive?
Oh yeah, but it's always been expensive, and it will continue to be expensive.
Okay.
That's what frustrates me is it continues to be expensive, notwithstanding tort reform and caps.
Which means they're just making more money.
That's exactly right. And the patients who are injured, the ones who are innocent, are the ones that pay the price for it.
And keep in mind, this is happening, folks, with the folks you elect. And there's a lot of issues you elect them for the reason on. You probably don't think about malpractice and the fact you may have to sue someday if someone ends up breaking a screw in your neck. But this is going against a backdrop, as you say, with the experience of what you see happening in hospitals, of more of these mistaken identities, other things happening. I mean, cutting off the wrong limb. This stuff's happening more, not less.
It is. And for the people like Darlene and Julie and Randy are the cases that don't get taken, those people don't understand that if we didn't have a 1-year statute of limitations, we had a 3-year statute of limitations, a lot of these people would have cases. That's not going to change with the legislature.
Do some
we
states
have, right
have
now.
longer statute of limitations?
Yeah, sure they do. Sure they do. Some of them have 3, some of them have 5 years. But that's not going to change with the government we have now. And you're right, it's the people. That they are the people. They speak for the people. I just don't think the people intended at the time that these people got elected that this was the result that they wanted to basically block their access to the courts.
Okay, and you think that's reflected, though, you were talking about how jurors are stingy. And that's what's interesting to me. I've knock on wood, would love to be on a jury. I've been called a couple times and I've never chosen, never been on a malpractice case. But I would think if I'm sitting there hearing evidence of a patient, I would put myself in the shoes of the victim who got messed up by the doctor as opposed to siding with the big hospital.
Well, there's two sides to everything. And Nick, let me be clear. I don't believe juries are stingy. What I believe is juries are conservative in this state. I believe juries are fair, and I believe in the jury system. What troubles me is we didn't need tort caps. We didn't need changes to the medical malpractice laws because juries keep the system in balance, and so do the judges. I mean, I believe in the system. What I don't like is when the government tells juries what they can and cannot do. That's what frustrates me. And we've said this before. You and I have talked about this. If a jury can sentence a man to death, a jury can decide what are proper damages in a case. Either you believe in the jury system or you don't. I do, for that matter. And so that's why I can't stand these laws that come in and tell juries and tell judges this is what you can do and this is what you can't do.
So you don't think any caps merit at all? I mean, I understand what you're saying about the sentencing someone to death, but does a juror really necessarily have a handle on what price you can put on if someone lost an arm? I mean, an arm, you could say, I'm sitting here, my arm's worth $100 million as far as I'm concerned.
I believe in people. I think the common sense of a jury trumps everything. I think they know exactly what to do. And let me tell you what else people don't understand, most of them don't. The jury's verdict is subject to the judge's approval, and then it's subject to the Court of Appeals approval, and then it's subject to the Supreme Court's approval. So there are safety valves all the way up the process.
And yet they still pass limitations.
Because they don't want as many cases being filed against doctors and hospitals. That's just the truth of it. And for that reason, many patients who are injured just aren't going to see their day in court.
Yeah. You've told me on more than one occasion, Clint, that you've had cases that clearly you think wrongs had been done, but you were powerless really for whatever reason.
Because
statute of limitations, the law, that you could not pursue it.
I have to follow the law. I have to practice within the confines of the law. I can always challenge a law to try to make a change, but in terms of a statute that the General Assembly passes and the governor approves, I have to live within those laws, just like everybody else does.
And this is outside of what you do, but just short of suing, if someone finds themselves closed out, but they know a wrong was done. Do they have any other recourse? What is that, filing a complaint with the medical board?
Yeah, you can file a complaint with the Board of Medical Examiners or with the Department of Health, or, if people are really strong-willed about it, and I advise this sometimes, call your legislator, call your House representative, your senator, and say, this is what happened to me. I don't like the law the way it is. The law needs to be changed. And, ask to testify at one of these Senate judiciary hearings where there's tort reform. I mean, believe it or not, Nick, they even want more restrictions on the rights of patients to sue.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Think something's on the horizon this next legislative session?
It always is. Every year we always have some new restriction that we have to fight off. And when injured people go and speak at these hearings to these legislators, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
Or sending emails saying, I don't want any more restrictions on lawsuits or patients' rights. Let's leave the system the way it is.
Yeah. And the simple fact is, if you're lucky enough to be healthy or you don't think about these types of things, it doesn't really impact you until you're in that position. And the average Joe doesn't really understand this stuff if they're not watching the show with us right now.
It's always somebody else's problem until it happens to you.
I know. You got to have empathy before it happens to you, my friend. That's the way it is. Clint, listen, as always,
good to see you.
Pleasure. Wash your hands after done. I was coughing. I apologize. But listen, thank you for coming on. It's always good seeing you. We'll have you again soon. And stick around. Programming note about Tomorrow Plus, we will have his phone number up for you. Call. It costs nothing to find out if you have a case. And boy, you sure don't want to let that opportunity slip if you do. We'll be back right after this with that number. Stay with us.